It gives me great pleasure to introduce Brigadier General Chris Horner. He joined the Canadian Air Force in 1998 as an aerospace controller and has held various roles over the years, including operational postings from deep within NORAD's underground complex of the Canadian Air Defense Sector, and as an Air Weapons Officer and Evaluator Senior Director with the United States Air Force E3 AWACS program. Recently, he's held senior leadership roles as the Deputy Joint Force Cyber Component Commander, and then more recently, the Commandant of the Canadian Forces Joint Warfare Center. This past June, he was appointed as the new commander of 3 Canadian Space Division, which I understand is one of the best jobs in the Air Force. And it gives me great pleasure to welcome Brigadier General Chris Horner to the stage and hear his keynote address.
So thanks, Mike. Thanks for the great introduction. It's like you've done this before in both of our roles. I just want to say, what an incredible group of people mustered in one room talking about my favorite thing, space. And I mean, I'm not going to say that I planted the last comments from Nina in that panel, but it was an ideal transition because all I want to do is be a wet blanket and maybe feel terrified. No, actually, thanks to Brian Gallant and the Space Canada team, hopefully I can provide some insight as to what I'm thinking about. And specifically, when Brian and I talked about this a couple weeks, months ago, he said, hey, you're the new guy. Why don't you just introduce yourself and tell people what you're thinking about? So, hi, I'm Chris. I'm formerly from Collingwood, Ontario, and by the age of 12, I had won a science fair for something I built on a Commodore 64, played the saxophone, and was arrested at least once. But we'll get into that. But I loved rockets. And so when I was a 5-year-old boy in kindergarten and Marc Garneau went to space, we're approaching that 40-year anniversary, for the rest of my life I just assumed Canadians went to space. That just seemed like a thing, because before you're 5, you don't really remember much. And so I just figured I would figure out how to get myself to space. And so through my adolescent years, I was given the opportunity to be given model rockets and no supervision. And what I will tell you is that when your grandparents look after you, and you find your dad's box of fireworks, and you try to make them fly higher by kind of carving out all the fireworks and putting them into the tube of the model rocket you built, and then you light it off. It doesn't actually go higher. There's physics involved, there's escape velocity involved, and what it does is catastrophically fail over your fence and in a brilliant display of fireworks and explosions and fire, partially like your neighbor's house on fire. So that's what I think about a lot. And I think about that energy and excitement, not of accidentally lighting my neighbor's house on fire, which is why the police came, and it's a whole other story, but what are we doing for Canadians and this country to get us back into space? And what am I doing in my role as the Joint Force Space Component Commander, which means nothing to most of you, but as the individual in charge of the dedicated practitioners who are delivering that defend and protect mission for space? What I will tell you is that for Canadians in Canada, we must prevail in our job so that you can do that fun exploration, commercial partnership development. So let me talk a little bit about the current environment. Rules-based international order, we've heard that before, it is threatened. It is threatened in the society that we have built for Canada, for the West, relies on space. It's undergirded by that idea that space will always be available. But we can't assume that. We can't assume away the fact that spacefaring nations are going to conduct responsible actions in space. And we can no longer settle for the status quo where that idea of the free, responsible use of outer space will go untested. The protection of our Arctic depends on our actions. The sovereignty of our country depends on our capabilities. And continental defense and the way of life for Canadians depends on how we respond to the threats that exist. Canadians in general, and I'm not going to say people in this room because you're exceptionally smart, but Canadians in general assume away space. They assume it's there. They assume their things work. They assume we're going to fly in it. They assume everything's great. And I think that they also have no idea how much we rely on that domain. Food supply chains, commerce, our entire economy, everything that we do, communication with loved ones, that is the space domain in action. That is the work of your area of expertise in action. Most Canadians just assume it away. They forget that everything they do in their life has a context in space. And I would tell you, it's not my job to terrify Canadians. I mean, I probably do that on a general basis. I'm really terrifying you right now, but it gets worse, so bear with me. It's my job to let people believe that assumption that space is free and responsible and will be uncontested, despite the fact that it's congested and contested today. My people need to do their job with your help to ensure our national economy survives, to ensure our way of life survives, and to ensure that we have that capability moving forward. And there's lots of people who will challenge that assumption. There are lots of people who will say, wow, we really should terrify Canadians, and then suddenly that will become an election issue, and suddenly we'll have more money, and suddenly the space industry will blossom into this amazing thing. I'm not sure terrifying Canadians is my job. I like to fight fear, not incite fear. And so as we have that conversation, yes, it's important to talk about the things that are out there, but our mission, which we have chosen to accept, is to enable that free and democratic way of life that makes use of space, and we'll continue to do that. There's some national considerations that we think about in the Department of National Defense. We've put out some policies lately, thanks to the government. Our North Strong and Free is the most recent. Before that was Strong, Secure, and Engaged. And it's the first time that the Department of National Defense has been given that opportunity to really get into the space domain and really talk about capabilities and really think forward to how are we going to make critical investments to defend this country. We see with NORAD modernization, additional investment, the prioritization of our Arctic, and how we're going to do both space and ground-based space surveillance, space domain awareness, surveillance from space, communications. All of that helps us deliver capability around a core national mission. Internal to the department, we are starting to see the final touches being put on a strategy for national defense. That is awesome. If only we could get to those next pieces. I'm not going to say that out loud. I had someone wonderful say that for me. That is the part where we synergize, to use that 1990s term, and get to a place where we have capability that's integrated across the economy that allows for Canadians to understand the importance of what we do. The Defence Space Strategy, which we will release this fall, is also going to be tightly nested into that strategy for national defense. And that, again, is a galvanizing piece of work that we will be able to share with everyone to talk about where we're going. Most importantly, that talks about our seriousness and whether or not we're a serious war-fighting nation ready to defend its people, ready to defend the domain of space. We can execute our missions today, sure. But we also are creating a momentum in the Air Force and the Canadian Forces to continue to build out to the future. And I think that's incredibly important. We're planning in 2028 and beyond, and what those capabilities look like that we need right now. But then, what do we need moving forward? And I think that there's a conversation now in the Government of Canada reaching 2% of GDP. Right? I'm not going to debate what that number needs to look like, but our government has come out and said it. And I think tied with the conversations now around Canada being part of AUKUS Pillar 2, which is that advanced capability, gives us more opportunity to explore how do we integrate in the commercial sector and deliver capabilities for the future of this country. What I'll tell you is we need to prevail. We need to deter. We need to be able to have the ability to defend and protect everything that we do to move forward. And why is this important? Well, If you haven't noticed, the geopolitical landscape is a little awkward. It is contested, it is unstable, and in the words of General Kenny, my commander, Canada is no longer some distant sanctuary protected by global threats from a vast ocean approach. We're surrounded by oceans, the enemy flies overhead. Adversarial governments, some like China and Russia, both of whom showed little interest in the responsive use of space or expanding their operational satellite fleets, and actively developing capabilities to contest our domain. The People's Liberation Army, 3 weeks ago, launched their 1,000th operational military satellite. That should start there. They are building at breathtaking speed capabilities on orbit and on the ground which will deny us our ability to democratically use space. What I can tell you also is that they have developed, tested, and tried direct ascent anti-satellite weapons, hypersonic glide vehicles, rendezvous and proximity operations satellites with grappling arms that have the ability to rendezvous, collect, take something from geostationary orbit, put it into graveyard orbit, return, look for the next thing you collect. That's terrifying. Their vast arrays of intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance satellites are being fielded not just yearly, not just monthly, but almost weekly. And that capability is expanding and accelerating. For Russia's part, give them a shout out as well. Despite the setbacks on their space-based capabilities that are really in no small part due to the sanctions that have been levied against them for an invasion of Ukraine, they are still a pretty formidable player in the space domain. They've proven both on-orbit and direct anti-satellite weapons. They have done so in ways that risk the lives of the astronauts, including one of their own on the International Space Station, by creating debris. And they continue to field capabilities that counter communications that we rely on. But I say most devastatingly, as our US allies have noted, they appear to have the intention to deploy a nuclear weapon into space. That will hold at risk the entirety of LEO. That will hold at risk other orbital regimes that we rely on. This is a wanton disregard of the Outer Space Treaty of 1967, and it threatens what modern societies depend on. Now, I'm not going to say that they're going to follow through with that, but they certainly have suggested they are. And as we look to that, and then we look to other conflicts, like invading a small country like Ukraine, it illustrates that they may not play by the rules-based international order that we've become so accustomed and privileged to hold. And I think if you transition to the war in Ukraine, you can look at some of the contemporary warfare changes that we're seeing at a very rapid pace, and how space-based technologies have emerged as decisive factors. Earth observation satellites have been essential in preventing surprise attack, informing tactical responses, and I think we know that Russia's targeting of the Viasat constellation served to demonstrate the vulnerability of some of our modern communication systems. Space-based ISR has enabled the Ukraine forces to accurately locate and strike targets deep into Russia, showcasing the significant impact of space on traditional combat effectiveness. Despite extensive and excessive jamming in the electromagnetic spectrum, resilient space-based data links have supported effective drone operations that you get to see on a daily basis. Well, I do, I don't know what you watch on TV, but that have allowed Ukraine to continue to fight. And I'd say finally, just simple things like how we're using satellite imagery, whether that's EOIR, whether that's SAR, has allowed to dissuade public opinion away from the disinformation campaigns of our adversaries. The conflict underscores the criticality of space for civilizations, not just warfighters. So, okay, that was a totally not at all scary, intro into the world and civilizations talk, good. The bottom line is this. It is a contested space at risk of being subjected by malign actors who risk or who wish to hold the rules-based international order hostage. They want to rewrite the script regardless of the cost of liberal democracies and regardless of the cost of liberal citizenry. We've rapidly learned what we need to do, and we need your help. There's been a lot of discussion on whether or not Canada is pulling its weight. I was sort of, the panel was hitting on that. Unfortunately, I wasn't here yesterday. I was giving some like hoorah warfighter speech in Winnipeg. Clearly, that's my favorite thing to do. But I'm not going to lead that discussion on our pulling her, because I think that, you know, Canada has a storied history in capability development, in space ingenuity and innovation, and we are still a world leader. So, you know, that's not a conversation we need to have. We're still awesome. You are all awesome. What you do is awesome. And we need to continue to put that back on the map. I can say, though, that we need to kind of pivot internal to where we're doing things in defense and focus on what we need to do for strategic objectives for this country. And so I just kind of want to lay out where my thinking is in that. So our strategic objectives and then the desired conditions to get there are sort of those North Stars for us. The things that we must do for Canadians. And they're kind of haphazardly written in documents all over, and so I'll save you the research time, because we don't have a strategy for national defense, and we don't have a national security strategy. We don't have there's a couple more there. But my job is to generate resilient, professional, modernized space coaches. I think you expect that of me. To detect threats to the Arctic, in and to the Arctic, Canada, North America, and its approaches. I think you expect that of me. To defend and protect the Arctic and Canadian areas of responsibility. To deter aggression and affirm the rules-based international order. To respond to domestic disasters, search and rescue, and national emergencies using the space domain to assist us. And to lead the shaping of international norms and responsible behaviors in space. I raise of hands to see who suggests that those aren't my job. Good. Check one for me. So what I'll tell you is, before you kind of come at me with the sales pitch and try to sell me something around like how you can help me with all those things, I'll just say I'm not normally the guy that buys things. There's another general for that. I won't give you his name either. It's just easier. At a minimum, we're going to take our priorities and align our activities to those kind of functions. And what I would say is, as we do that and we think about a Space Force fit for joint operations in the future and for defending this great country, I'm going to operate across four national domains, four national mission domains. First and foremost, it's something we haven't talked about, something I'm going to say out loud, is integrated space fires. Now, for non-military people in the room, you're going to put fires inside something and light something on fire in space. It's hard to burn. There's no oxygen. This is space command and control. This is electronic warfare. This is counter-communications, counter-space systems to allow us to obfuscate our actions, deny the adversary ability to overcome us, and allow freedom of maneuver in outer space. Very simple stuff. This is not me blowing up satellites, just so we're clear. I'm not looking to create space debris. I'm not looking to put Colonel Sheridan at risk when he goes around the moon. That is not my objective. My objective is to allow him to do that. My objective is to create the responsible use of space so that you can do the work you need to do for our citizens. What I would tell you, to get to that, we need to create some desired conditions. And this is the point where I think we need your help. First is protection. Our modern way of life is built on and supported by space capability across every sector we're talking about. CAF operations are no different. And while protection means different things to different people, it's sort of two parts for me. We must protect and defend, not pretend. Let's not pretend anything. Let's just do it for real. We must protect and defend existing space systems in the face of the threats the adversaries now have arrayed against us. That's both military and commercial. And we must protect the joint force
and Canadians from space and naval attack. This will include the need to establish and enhance physical protection of our capabilities on the ground, secure against cyber threats through cyber mission assurance, develop and deploy electronic warfare capabilities to enhance our ability to maneuver in space, to create that freedom of action to defend democracy in this great country, orbital warfare by a different name, and then harness counter-space joint fires to assure that freedom of action. Next is resilience. And I think some of the panels yesterday may have talked about that. My apologies for not being here. I think we have to be honest with ourselves in the military, with Canadians. To prevail in deterrence, in conflict, we must have the capacity to sustain operations in the face of a first or preemptive strike from an adversary who's unrestrained against our capabilities, and we must be able to continue to deliver the critical functions Canadians depend on. We are not, it's being recorded, we are not a first strike nation. We need to, however, be able to take a punch and then get back up and finish that fight. That is what is expected of our Canadian forces. So we need to develop an ability to swiftly anticipate, defend against, recover from, respond to a diverse array of scenarios, conditions, and threats underpinned by our overall resilience and defense capabilities for our integrated joint operations. I would assess that we are limited in the moment in our resilience, and this is not surprising, but it worries me. Over time, with prioritized investment, a strategy, we will enhance the breadth, depth, and effectiveness of the resilience of the space domain. And through protective initiatives, shape the operational environment to our advantage. Third condition is legitimacy. We must ensure the legitimacy of the defensive freedom of action in the space domain by assembling a team with the right capabilities, a skilled team, of the right capabilities across an integrated space operation while cultivating intelligence required to counter threats in an increasingly congested and contested domain during conflict. But frankly, this builds on our strengths as Canadians. This legitimacy is founded in our commitment to continued leadership through the responsible use of space, the conduct of our lessons, the conduct we've completed so far, and the lessons we've learned along the way. Strategy offers us greater flexibility, both from a military perspective, but also to our national leaders, and bolsters support from our allies and partners while opening avenues for non-traditional collaboration. And finally, orchestration. Great word. It's our ability to integrate and synchronize joint force, whole of government, allied partner, and commercial capabilities to position CAF, joint, and space forces capable of operating and prevailing across the spectrum of competition, in crisis, and in conflict. Leadership in our domain across national boundaries is strengthened by the way we have structured our operations in the military and by the partnerships we are beginning to form with industry. We achieve synchronization through all matters of technology, but also the way we plan, the way we make friends with one another across government departments. Where's my CSA piece? It's incredibly important. No singular agency, department, organization can organize, defend, protect, and commercialize outer space, the space domain, or beyond. I think we need to consider that is incredibly important and figure out how we do better. As the Canadian Armed Forces moves closer to what we call pan-domain command and control, that's all seeing, all knowing, all dancing, all connected. There's less dancing, but you know what I mean. The processes in space have to shift from a paradigm where we are centrally controlled and centrally executed. Because our adversaries are going to seek to impose cost on our kill chains and our sensing capability. And we've got to lean towards a centralized command model with federated control, and I'll say it out loud, AI-augmented execution models. We cannot hold things at the highest levels that we have thus far. We need to push power to the edge. And so, why is this all important? As I kind of talk through the current environment, which is, again, somewhat terrifying from my viewpoint. And how do we achieve our national objectives? Well, this is where I think D&D has recognized the significant investment is required. Over the next 10 years, it's going to invest just over $21 billion across 10 major projects to enhance surveillance of space, surveillance from space, and communications over the next decade. This commitment underscores the priority to maintain a strategic edge in an increasingly complex environment. It does not account for the conversations we're now having around integrated space fires, counter space capability, opportunities with further investment that we'll see under AUKUS, and the conversations towards 2% GDP. But to achieve success, to allow us to move at breathtaking speed, I simply demand, internal to my own organization, that we figure out a way to get to broader commercial integration. And we're trying. And CSA's trying. We're trying to figure that out. And as two government departments trying to fight the system, I don't know if I can say that, but yeah, we're working through the system. There's just this convergence that I see of interest between commercial sectors, military, defense applications, human space exploration, like precision navigation and timing is one of them. That's an easy one. But we need to go beyond that. We need to go beyond the bespoke military communications that we are going to need for sort of critical command and control functions, and then kind of get to those, what can be shared for high bandwidth global communication requirements that are strikingly similar between commercial and military requirements. I mean, I'm really hoping this isn't a surprise. Anyone? I see some people actually glaring at me, saying I told you so like 5 years ago. I hear you. But this overlap creates valuable opportunity for partnerships. It allows us to share two things, both burdens and risks. And that's the part we're navigating. Ideally, government partnerships will lead to expanded access to communications at reduced costs, thanks to the competitive nature. But collaborative initiatives will incorporate evolving technologies faster. That's what I, as a warfighter, as a defender of Canada. Cooler stuff faster. More ability to do things faster to allow you the freedom of action to carry out your work. So as an aside, there's an entire school of thought that's kind of end on this around rendezvous proximity operations and docking. So how do you extend the life of things in space? This isn't a new concept. We do it in the air domain regularly. I flew on an aircraft that never had to land, which is awesome because someone would just show up in the middle of the sky and put more gas in it, and my days got longer. Tell you what, 19 hours inside of a tube that smells like farts is terrible. Just gonna throw that out there. But sort of to get back on topic, as I end my time, I think we all have a part to play in how partnerships can manifest within government contract relationships, projects. And I'm really hoping, and I mean this genuinely, this isn't just like, hey, someone gave you that microphone. I'm really hoping that we can enable that collectively to get there. I know that some of our key allies have enabled a commercial space integration strategy. I know for our part, we've established a commercial integration cell with a couple of our commercial partners that we have in the contract with the goal of expanding those partnerships. Space capabilities are integral to global security. We know it. They empower decision makers. We know it. Prioritizing investment in space, Canada's space sector, is crucial, not just for you, for national security. And the Canadian Armed Forces, these capabilities give us distinct operational advantage that we cannot do alone. Somebody said it yesterday, space is hard. Yeah, it's awesome. There's endless possibilities for human exploration. enhanced global communication, economic stability, prosperity, and national resilience. But it's hard. It's also awesome, right? Like space is awesome. We gotta remember that. We've had leadership from academia, industry, government. Let's not soon forget Colonel Jeremy Hansen in the back there on the Artemis mission. Gave me this super cool pin today that I legally put on my uniform. At least this is not being broadcast on CPAC. But when I was asked to talk about what I think about and why I'm up all night, it's generally not great stuff. But what I want to think about is the story of that 12-year-old boy who accidentally lit his neighbor's house on fire. Because that's the excitement. That's the wonder. That's the piece of space that we all are in this room to be excited about. So please do that. Please dream the impossible. Please achieve the unimaginable. Push the limits. Achieve escape velocity. Maybe 2 or 3 fireworks, not the whole box of the rocket. For as you do, know that there's a dedicated group of extremely skilled practitioners, of space warfare officers, and space technical operators that have the watch. And they are driving every day to ensure the conditions are set to allow you to conduct your mission. At heart, I think we all want to ride with the Artemis crew. But also remember that to do that, to get to that, to put humans around and on the moon, to move forward, we need to do it together. Because if I learned anything from the Lego movie, it's that everything's awesome when you're part of a team.